Because I value rationality over superstition, freedom over oppression, and freedom of expression over censorship, I'm participating in Everybody Draw Muhammad Day 2010. While it is not my intent to anger any particular individual or group of individuals, it is my intent to join those who wish to show to the radical Muslim world that they cannot bully us with their unfounded personal beliefs. It is my intent to show them that if we can draw Muhammad and not be struck down by Allah, then either Allah doesn't care or Allah doesn't exist. Whichever of these propositions is true, it only goes to show these people that they've based their worldview on faulty logic, intolerance of difference, fear of losing control, and senseless violence in the name of an imaginary being. It doesn't make any sense. And that's why I've drawn this picture. This is my representation of Muhammad on his flying horse. If I draw this picture and don't die, then you should seriously reconsider the veracity of your claims, the validity of your worldview, and the value of holding on to your primitive ideology. If Allah doesn't strike me down, then Allah isn't powerful enough to do his own work. If Allah needs you, a mortal, flawed, temporal being, to threaten me and carry out violence against me, then why do you worship him? And if the world has come to this, killing over a cartoon, then I'd just as soon not be a part of this world anymore. Threaten us, beat us up, kill us, do your worst, but you will never silence the voice of reason. Peace be unto you.
عندما وضعت القرآن والأحاديث والكتب الإسلامية تحت عدسة مجهري توصلت إلى قناعة مطلقة. لا يمكن أن يقرأ إنسان السيرة النبوية لمحمد ويؤمن بها ويخرج إلى الحياة إنسانا سليما معافى نفسيا وعقليا. أنت تذكر الطريقة التي قتل بها السيدة عصماء بنت مروان عندما قطع أتباعه جسدها إربا وهي ترضع طفلها، والمشكلة عادوا إليه يكبرون فقال لا يتناطحوا بها عن زان. أنت تعرف أن الماعز تتناطح لأتفه الأسباب، ولكن عند محمد قتل امرأة مرضعة سبب أتفه من أن يتناطح به عن زان. هل هذا نبي من عند الله؟ يعتريني الأسف الشديد عندما تسمح الجزيرة لمخلوق معتوه إرهابي كالقرضاوي كي ينفث من خلال منبرها سمومه ويبث فتاويه الإرهابية وثرثراته. كانت العبارات التي استخدمها ضدي قد حرضت الكثير من الشباب المسلم المغسول الدماغ المعصوب العيون المبرمج على الكره ليمطرني بوابل من الشتائم والتهديدات بعد الحلقة مباشرة التي تناول بها ظهوري على الجزيرة. عندما يعتبر الإسلام المرأة ناقصة عقل وأنا أدحض مصداقية هذا القول، في تلك الحالة الإسلام يهاجمني وأنا أرد هجومه. عندما يدعو الإسلام إلى قتل الآخر الذي لا يؤمن به وأنا أدحض مصداقية هذا القول، في تلك الحالة الإسلام يهاجمني وأنا أرد هجومه. أنا لا أهاجم، أنا أنتقد الإسلام، ولكن للأسف الشديد نحن ضحايا التربية الإسلامية لا نرى في النقد إلا هجوما. أنا دوما أركز على اللغة، لغة الإسلام. لغة الإسلام لغة سلبية ميتة مشحونة بالعنف والغضب والحقد والعنصرية. الإنسان ناتج لغوي وهو حصيلة ما يسمعه في حياته من لغة سلبية وإيجابية. فإن غلبت اللغة السلبية في حياته خرج إلى الحياة إنسانا سلبيا نزقا رافضا غير منتج. وإن غلبت اللغة الإيجابية خرج إلى الحياة إنسانا إيجابيا سعيدا منتجا. ولذلك لغة الإسلام السلبية فشلت، لم تنتج إنسانا يستطيع أن يتفاعل مع الحياة بعفوية وبإيجابية، أنجبت إنسانا سلبيا. لو ألقينا نظرة على المجتمعات الإسلامية نستطيع أن نرى ما استطاع أن يفعله هذا الرجل السلبي. أنا لا أعتبر الإسلام دينا من خلال مفهومي للدين. الإسلام عقيدة سياسية تفرض نفسها بالقوة. أي عقيدة على سطح الأرض تدعو إلى قتل من لا يؤمن بها هي ليست عقيدة، ليست دينا، وإنما عقيدة شمولية تفرض نفسها بالقوة. عندما أقرأ آية على سبيل المثال: والزانية والزاني فاجلدوا كل واحد منهما 100 جلدة لا تأخذكم بهما شفقة أو رأفة، لا أرى في تلك الآية أي روحانية. عندما تستطيع العقيدة أن تجرد أتباعها من آخر ذرة رأفة تكون قد جردتهم أيضا من روحانيتهم. المسيح رمز السلام، لم يحمل سيفا، لم يقطع رقبة، لم يكفر إنسانا. أما المشكلة في الإسلام إذا فعلنا كما فعل المسيحيون في القرون الوسطى وأردنا أن نعود إلى حياة محمد وأفعاله وأقواله سنكون في ورطة أكبر من الورطة التي نعيشها اليوم، وسننتهي بأسامة بن لادن وأمثاله. اقرأ حياة محمد، ماذا تجد فيها؟ غزواته وزيجاته وأحاديثه التي يقشعر البدن لبعض تلك الأحاديث. يقشعر البدن عندما يقول جنة المرأة تحت قدم زوجها. التعاليم الإسلامية استفحلت داخل جماجم المسلمين، ولا أجد طريقة إلا بفتح تلك الجماجم وتنظيف الأدمغة من الخلايا السرطانية التي تهدد حياته. عندما زحف الشعب السوري إلى السفارة الدنماركية وحرقها، حرق قلبي معه. لماذا؟ لماذا؟ الشعب السوري يموت جوعا. الإنسان السوري اللي هو صاحب حضارة يلهث وراء رغيف الخبز، فلماذا لا يزحف إلى قصر رئيسه وقد بلغت ميزانيته 40 بليون دولار في البنوك الأوروبية، ويحرق هذا القصر بمن فيه؟ زحفوا إلى السفارة الدنماركية وأعطوا الغرب صورة غير صحيحة عن الشعب السوري الأخلاقي والحضاري، ولذلك أصف سلوكهم بالهمجية والتخلف. الصراع الإسرائيلي الفلسطيني صراع ديني. أنا مع القضية الفلسطينية، أنا مع الأطفال الفلسطينيين. عذابات النساء الفلسطينيات تقض مضجعي. أنا لا أستطيع أن أدوس على نمنة، فهل يعقل أن أكون ضدهم؟ لا يمكن، لا يمكن. هنالك خلاف سياسي، عليهم أن يسألوا قاداتهم والدور التي تلعبه تلك القيادات في حل تلك المشكلة. لكن هناك جذور دينية للمشكلة. كنت أقرأ في كتاب إسلامي منذ أسبوع أو أسبوعين، قرأت قصة صغيرة تقول: كان محمد يمشي مع بعض أتباعه فسمعوا ضجة، فقالوا له: ما هذا يا رسول الله؟ قال: إنهم اليهود يتعذبون في قبورهم. بغض النظر عن الخلافات يومها بين محمد واليهود، هذا القول يشير إلى أن قبور أجدادهم كانت في السعودية. مظبوط؟
صح.
هم أبناء المنطقة. البرهان على أنهم أبناء المنطقة يأتي من الكتب الإسلامية ومن القرآن نفسه. المشكلة مع المسلمين أنهم لا يميزون بين نبيهم وبين أنوفهم. فعندما تنتقد محمد وتنتقد أفعاله وأعماله وتنتقد سيرته
وكأنك ضربته
وكأنك جدعت أنفه.
Muhammad's first impression of his revelations was that they were demonic in nature. Muhammad tried repeatedly to kill himself. Muhammad allowed his followers to rape their female captives. The Quran allows Muslims to beat their rebellious wives into submission. Muhammad says the Bible talks about him when, according to the Bible, he's a false prophet. Muhammad married the divorced wife of his own adopted son. Muhammad was disgraced by God in death. The one way he said he would die if he's a false prophet, that is exactly how Muhammad died. Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl. Muhammad delivered revelations from the devil and came back and blamed the devil for this revelation. Muhammad affirmed the teachings of the Torah and the Gospel when his teachings completely contradict the teachings of the Torah and the Gospel. Muhammad tortured a man named Kanana for money. He killed people who criticized his religion. He tried to divorce his wife Sauda when she became unattractive, and he had to cut a deal that's affirmed by Allah in order for her to be able to eat. Muhammad's revelation to his dinner guests was so obviously from Muhammad and not from Allah. We wonder how anyone can take the Quran seriously after reading it. Muhammad was a victim of black magic, according to him, not according to us. Muhammad delivered clearly false prophecies. He encouraged his followers to practice mutta. Mutta, this is prostitution. He had 9 wives when the Quran allows Muslims to have 4. He broke his vow to his wife about having sex with his slave girl, and the Quran is completely theologically incoherent. You cannot make sense of it when Allah gives all of this revelation and then Allah is the one who corrupts it by tricking and deceiving people into believing that Jesus died on the cross. The Quran teaches that stars are missiles that God uses to shoot demons when they try to sneak into heaven. Muhammad ordered his followers to kill apostates, even those who left for very good reason. According to the Quran, Allah is the greatest of deceivers when, according to the Bible, Satan is the father of lies. Muhammad had no assurance of his salvation despite the fact that he is the greatest of Muslims. According to Muhammad, women are stupid and immoral. Islam promotes idolatry. Muhammad said there would be no discrepancy in the Quran if it's the word of God, when there's all kinds of discrepancy. The Quran is based on the argument from literary excellence, the silliest argument ever offered for anything. Muhammad told his followers about a paradise that would make Hugh Hefner blush with the amount of sexual perversion in it. And, of course, if Christianity is true, Islam cannot be the truth because they teach different things. Islam teaches that the sun sets in a pool of murky water. The Quran has been corrupted when Allah promised to protect it. The concept of abrogation makes no sense. Allah is turning things right around, changing revelations from one week to the next when this is supposed to be His eternal word. Muhammad supported his fledgling religion by robbing people. Islam took rituals from the pagans. It stole stories from the groups around Muhammad during the time. Muhammad told his followers to breastfeed an adult in order to do away with sexual desire between them. Muhammad wore women's clothing. Islam deifies Muhammad by encouraging Muslims to talk to him directly during prayers. And Islam completely reverses the gospel by having the guilty Judas die on behalf of the innocent Jesus instead of the innocent Jesus dying on behalf of sinners. False revelation from Gabriel, and obviously false revelation. The Quran confuses Mary, the mother of Jesus, with Miriam, the sister of Aaron and Moses. Hygiene practices that would kill you if you took them seriously. Muhammad takes historical figures like Alexander the Great, turns them into Muslims when we know they weren't Muslims. Allah has no love for unbelievers, which means He is deficient in love. Allah punishes Jews and Christians for the sins of Muslims, clearly unjust, even according to what Muslims tell me. Muhammad encouraged his followers to violently subjugate the rest of the world, clearly inconsistent with the revelation of Jesus, which Muhammad affirms. Allah wants people to sin, showing that Allah is dependent on human beings to show His forgiveness. Islam makes Satan the true hero of everything, and finally portrays Jesus as a miserable failure. Islam exalts Satan insults God and makes Jesus look like a failure. That's what Islam does at the end of the day. And you're telling me this guy is a prophet?
Chapter 13. The Pedophile Pirate.
When the prophet married Aisha, she was very young and not yet ready for consummation.
Chairman Mohammed settled into his public housing project and immediately began to act like the fool he had become.
Ishaq. In the year of the prophet's arrival, Abba Uama died from a rattling in the throat. The messenger said, "His death is an evil thing for the Jews and the Arab hypocrites, for they are sure to say, if Muhammad were really a prophet, his companion would not have died. But truly I have no power with Allah, either for myself or for my companions."
Truer words were never spoken. Muhammad had no morals either.
Tabari. The prophet married Aisha in Mecca 3 years before the Hijrah, after the death of Khadijah. At the time she was 6. Ishaq. When the apostle came to Medina, he was 53. Tabari. In May 623 A.D., or AH1, Allah's messenger consummated his marriage to Aisha.
He would be dead in 10 years. She hadn't even lived that long. Pedophilia was, and continues to be, child abuse. The abused had come full circle. He was now an abuser. Accusing a prophet of being a pedophile sounds outrageous, yet the evidence is undeniable.
Tabari. When the prophet married Aisha, she was very young and not yet ready for consummation.
This is how it all happened.
Tabari. My mother came to me while I was being swung on a swing between 2 branches and got me down. My nurse took over and wiped my face with some water and started leading me. When I was at the door, she stopped so I could catch my breath. I was brought in while Muhammad was sitting on a bed in our house. My mother made me sit on his lap. The other men and women got up and left. The prophet consummated his marriage with me in my house when I was 9 years old.
Given a choice, I believe most people would prefer to get their spiritual inspiration from someone who isn't a sexual predator. Muhammad struggled to justify this behavior.
Bukhari. The prophet said, "A virgin should not be married till she is asked for her consent." "O apostle, how will the virgin express her consent?" He said, "By remaining silent." Allah's apostle told Aisha, "You were shown to me twice in my dreams,"
also known as sexual fantasies.
"I beheld a man or angel carrying you in a silken cloth. He said to me, 'She is yours, so uncover her.' And behold, it was you. I would then say to myself, 'If this is from Allah, then it must happen.'"
Allah not only approved pedophilia, He insisted upon it. That makes the Islamic God as perverted as his prophet. Since 53-year-old pedophiles are not prophet material, I want to give Islam every opportunity to clear this up. The next hadith is from Aisha.
Tabari. There are special features in me that have not been in any woman, except for what Allah bestowed on Miriam bint Imran.
She was referring to Mary, the mother of Yeshua, although she didn't know her name or her father's name, and none of the features actually applied. Amram is actually the father of Moses. With Miriam, or Mary, being Moses' sister, Muhammad got confused and erroneously attributed Moses' father to Miriam, the mother of Yeshua.
I do not say this to exalt myself over any of my companions. "What are these?" someone asked. Aisha replied, "The angel brought down my likeness."
She was a babe.
"The messenger married me when I was 7. My marriage was consummated when I was 9.
She was abused.
He married me when I was a virgin, no other man having shared me with him.
She was a child.
Inspiration came to him when he and I were in a single blanket.
A baby inspired him.
I was one of the dearest people to him. A verse of the Quran was revealed concerning me when the community was almost destroyed."
She inspired Allah.
"And I saw Gabriel when none of his other wives saw him."
She lied. Think about the implications of what Aisha just said. Muhammad was inspired. A Quran surah was handed down while the Prophet was having sex with a little girl. Allah didn't find pedophilia the least bit troubling. The following confirms that the first Muslims were consumed by greed. The Prophet was inspired by the body of a child, and the circumstances surrounding the Quran revelations are as perverted as the scriptures themselves.
Bukhari. The people used to send presents to the Prophet on the day of Aisha's turn
To have sex with him.
Aisha said his other wives gathered in the apartment of Salama,
Wife number 2.
and said, the people send presents on the day of Aisha's turn, and we too love the good presents just as much as she does. You should tell Allah's apostle to order the people to send their presents to him, regardless of whose turn it may be. Repeated that to the Prophet, and he turned away from her. When the Prophet returned to she repeated the request again. The Prophet again turned away. After the third time, the Prophet said, don't trouble me by harming Aisha, for by Allah, the divine inspiration,
That would be Quran surahs.
never came to me while I was under the blanket of any woman among you except her.
If there have been any skeptics who have made it this far without acknowledging that the Quran was inspired to satisfy Muhammad's cravings rather than to save men's souls, welcome to the realm of reason. Earlier I accused the victim of pedophilia of lying. I want to explain why. Her 8th divine gift was contradicted during one of the bedroom revelations.
Bukhari. The Prophet said, Aisha, this is Gabriel. He sends his greetings and salutations. Aisha said, salutations and greetings to him and Allah's blessings. Addressing the Prophet, she said, you see what I don't see.
This hadith reveals how perverted Muhammad was and how sane other Arabs were by contrast.
Bukhari. I participated in a ghazwa,
Which would be an Islamic raid.
with the Prophet. I said, Apostle, I am a bridegroom. He asked me whether I had married a virgin or a matron. I answered, a matron. He said, why not a virgin who would have played with you? Then you could have played with her. Apostle, my father was martyred, and I have some young sisters, so I felt it not proper that I should marry a young girl as young as them.
It's obvious who corrupted whom. Muhammad's behavior would be considered criminal in every civilized nation on earth. No moral society has ever condoned old men having sex with young children. If you are caught, you're locked up, separated from decent people. Pedophilia is so heinous, convicted felons torment child abusers. Even they can't stand to be in their presence. Such a grotesque act disqualified Muhammad from his alleged calling. What's more, his personal perversity had a lasting legacy. Muslims follow his example. While most of what happens in the Islamic world escapes our purview, as Islam is hostile to all freedoms, including press and inquiry, we have gained glimpses in Afghanistan and Iraq. There, virginal young girls are frequently raped by Muslim men. And as you would expect in a culture influenced by Muhammad, the victims are shamed, not the perpetrators. It's little wonder Muhammad's contemporaries call him mad, insane, and demon-possessed. It is little wonder Islamic clerics try so hard to hide this stuff from the world. It is why Muhammad assassinated a score of poets, the journalists of their day, who had the courage to expose him. It is why Muslim rulers issue fatwas today. Decadent egomaniacs like Muhammad are deeply troubled and tortured souls. Their insecurities drive unbridled lusts for power, sex, and money. Their feelings of inadequacy cause them to be shy, yet their outward manner overcompensates, making them abusive and purposefully deceptive. They need others to bow down to them in submission, and they require unquestioned obedience. Muhammad was a textbook case, as was Adolf Hitler, his modern twin.
Bukhari. The Prophet was shyer than a vain virgin girl. Allah's apostle said, whoever obeys me obeys Allah, and whoever disobeys me disobeys Allah, and whoever obeys the ruler I appoint obeys me, and whoever disobeys him disobeys me.
Pedophilia, incest, and rape are all perverted manifestations of a thirst for power and control. Insecurity is often the cause. I apologize for dragging you through this muck. I realize the material we just covered would be illegal, even in a pornographic movie. And we are not done. We have yet to deal with the prophet's other depravities, incest and rape. But at least you know why this control freak's paradise was a brothel filled with ever-attentive young virgins ready to be conquered. Muhammad, like his religion, was fixated on the flesh. According to the Quran, bodies were reassembled so that the skins could be singed in hell and teased in paradise. Man's spirit was incidental. I believe this is because the religion was made in the prophet's image. It reflected his character and desires. To appreciate Islam's elevation of body over soul, we must look at the source of his inspiration. Muhammad was right when he described the angel that visited him as a slave.
Bukhari. So Allah conveyed the inspiration to his slave Gabriel, and then he, Gabriel, conveyed it to Muhammad.
Angels, fallen or heavenly, demonic or godly, have no choice. To borrow another line from Islam, they must submit and obey. Islam's dark spirit knew all about angelic submission, because he once was one.
Quran 7, verse 11. It is we who created you and gave you shape. Then we ordered the angels to fall and prostrate themselves to Adam.
The same passage goes on to correctly implicate Satan and suggest angels are eternal.
Quran 7, verse 19. Satan said, Your Lord only forbid you this tree, lest you should become angels, immortal, living forever.
Satan, like all angels, is a four-dimensional construct. That is to say, he can maneuver in time, the fourth dimension. While this may sound complex, we have known since Einstein that space has a fourth axis, an infinite aspect we cannot yet navigate. In this regard, angels are superior to men as we are trapped in three-dimensional bodies, stuck in time. Yahweh is not, which is why his name means I am, or I exist. He is immortal and timeless. His infinity exists in the fourth dimension. This is how Yahweh predicts the future. He knows the future not because he has ordained it, but because he has already been there and witnessed the culmination of our choices. Now put yourself in Satan's wings for a moment. He knows that his spirit is inferior to ours for two reasons. We are made spiritually in God's image. We have choice. With choice, we have the capacity to be creative and to love. This is why God created us. These attributes remain his and our most powerful qualities. So Satan doesn't want to compete with us spiritually. There he cannot win. But when he competes bodily, he cannot lose. We are three-dimensional, he is four. The difference is infinite, just as it is between the two- and three-axis realms. The comparison is like a cartoon rendering of Mickey Mouse competing with Walt Disney, or more accurately, with Walt's secretary. This is why Islam is focused on the body. It's why the covetous Muhammad was the perfect satanic prophet. The arrival of the first child born to the Muslims after the Hijrah was celebrated.
Tabari. The messenger's companions cried, Allahu Akbar.
Allah is greater or greatest, therefore greater than Yahweh is the implication.
When she was born, this was because the story was circulated among the Muslims that the Jews claimed that they had bewitched them so that no children would be born. The Muslims praised Allah that he had falsified the Jews' claim.
They were saying that their gods' magic spells were more powerful than the Jewish gods. Even if they were right, it made Islam wrong. The next 7 section heads in Tabari's The Foundation of the Community begin with
Expedition.
The Arabic word is
Maghazi,
which is translated
raid
in the Sirah. It actually means invasion. It is synonymous with
jihad.
defined by Bukhari as
holy fighting in Allah's cause.
A more complete explanation is provided in the Book of Jihad on page 580 of Maktaba Dar as-Salam's publication of Sahih al-Bukhari.
Jihad is holy fighting in Allah's cause with full force and weaponry. It is given the utmost importance in Islam and is one of its pillars. By jihad, Islam is established. Allah is made superior and He becomes the only God who may be worshipped. By jihad, Islam is propagated and made superior. By abandoning jihad, may Allah protect us from that, Islam is destroyed and Muslims fall into an inferior position. Their honor is lost, their lands are stolen, and Muslim rule and authority vanish. Jihad is an obligatory duty in Islam on every Muslim. He who tries to escape this duty dies as a hypocrite.
Memorize this paragraph. Shout it out to all who will listen. Every word was derived from the Quran. Every word was lived by Muhammad. It accurately represents fundamental Islam. So much so, each of the 150 hadiths that follow this definition of jihad speak of fighting. None suggest a spiritual struggle. Among them, Muhammad says that the most important deed is jihad, fighting in Allah's cause. In Bukhari, Volume 4, Book 52, number 44. And the Quran agrees, saying peaceful Muslims are hypocrites, destined for hell. They are
the worst of creatures, the most vile of animals.
You will find this in Quran Surahs 3 and 33. So that there is no question regarding the appropriateness of using Bukhari as a source, here's what the Islamic scholars had to say in the preface.
Al-Bukhari's hadith is the most authentic and true book of the Prophet.
The translator said,
I am perfectly sure that the translation, with Allah's help and after all the great efforts exerted in its production, has neared perfection.
The imams from the cradle of Islam, the Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia, said,
It has been unanimously agreed that Imam Bukhari's work is the most authentic of all the other sources in hadith literature put together. It is second only to the Quran.
That leaves you and me at the crossroads of destiny. If we don't deal with the awesome gravity of Islamic jihad, our future will vanish before our eyes. If we wish to avoid the abyss of world war, we must expose the doctrine committed to world conquest. We must liberate Muslims from Islam.
The expedition led by Hamza
was the first Maghazi. Hamza, a huntsman in Mecca, was now a
Muhajid,
plural of Mujahideen,
a Muslim warrior in jihad. Tabari. In Ramadan, 7 months after the Hijrah, Muhammad entrusted a white war banner to Hamza with the command of 30 immigrants. Their aim was to intercept a Quraysh caravan.
7 months after fleeing Mecca in shame, the pedophile prophet has become a pirate and terrorist. So that there is no misunderstanding, let's define these less than admirable characterizations. Pirate is a renegade who, along with others under his command, uses force of arms to steal the property of others. A terrorist is a person who violently attacks civilians, destroys their property, and disrupts their economy as a means to achieve a political objective. The flag Muhammad handed to Hamza was a war banner. It was one of the many symbols the Prophet stole from his patriarch Qusay. Hamza was a warrior. He was given command over 30 men. Their aim was to intercept a caravan, a civilian economic enterprise, owned by the people Muhammad had promised to slaughter because they had teased him. Although we are told
they separated without a battle,
the intent was piracy and terror. Their failure did not change what they had become, what Islam had done to them. At this point in the Prophet's career, there were simply more good guys than there were bad guys, and he was as inept as a pirate as he was as a prophet. Turning to Muhammad's biographer, we learn more about the mindset of the first Muslims.
Ishaq. Hamza's expedition to the seashore comprised 30 riders, all emigrants from Mecca. He met Abu Jal, who had 300 riders. Ammar intervened, for he was at peace with both sides. Hamza,
Muhammad's raider,
said, "So they allege, wonder at good sense and at folly, and at lack of sound counsel and sensible advice. Their people and property are not yet violated, as we haven't attacked. We call them to Islam."
which is surrender.
But they treat it as a joke. They laughed until I threatened them. At the apostle's command, I was the first to march beneath his flag, a victorious banner from Allah. Even as they sullied forth, burning with rage, Allah frustrated their schemes.
Abu Jal, a pagan businessman, responded to the first Muslim militants.
Ishaq, I am amazed at the causes of anger and folly at those who stir up strife by lying controversy. They abandon our fathers' ways. They come with lies to twist our mind. But even their lies cannot confound the wise. If you give up your raids, we will take you back, for you are our cousins, our kin. But they chose to believe Muhammad and became obstinately contentious. All their deeds became evil.
As always, the Meccans understood Islam. Even Ishaq believed.
Ishaq, the raid on Wadan was the first Maghazi.
He said,
The expedition of Ubaidah Harith was second. The apostle sent Ubaidah out on a raid with 60 or 80 riders from the immigrants, there not being a single Ansar among them. He encountered a large number of Quraysh in the Hijaz. Abu Bakr composed a poem about the raid.
Some of the most memorable lines include,
When we called them to the truth, they turned their backs and howled like bitches. Allah's punishment on them will not tarry. I swear by the Lord of camels.
I assume he's speaking of Allah.
That I am no perjurer. A valiant band will descend upon the Quraysh, which will leave women husbandless. It will leave men dead with vultures wheeling round. It will not spare the infidels.
To which a pagan named Slave to Allah replied,
Ishaq, does your eye weep unceasingly over the ruins of a dwelling?
This would be Allah's house.
That the shifting sands obscure? Is your army and declaration of war firm enough that we should abandon images venerated in Mecca, passed on to heirs by a noble ancestor?
That noble ancestor was Qusay.
Are your steeds panting at the fray? Are your swords polished white? Are they in the hands of warriors, dangerous as lions? Or are you conceited? Are you here to quench your thirst for vengeance? Nay, they withdraw in great fear and awe.
Of the raid, the historian reports,
Tabari, 8 months after the Hijra, Allah's messenger entrusted a white war banner to Ubaidah and ordered him to march to Batan Rabig. He reached the pass of Mara near Jufha at the head of 60 emigrants without a single Ansari, or Medina Muslim, among them. They met the polytheists at a watering place called Aya. They shot arrows at one another, but there was no hand-to-hand fighting.
The Prophet is now a repeat offender. 8 months into the Islamic era, and he has ordered multiple attacks. Muslim apologists profess that Muhammad was forced into defending Islam, and that he was neither aggressor, pirate, nor terrorist, but that position is indefensible. Nothing is known about the Muhammad of history. No independent records exist. All that is known about him is contained in these hadith. If they say he attacked a civilian caravan and then ordered men to march and fight in another town, he did. Therefore, he was the aggressor. There isn't even a hint of self-defense in these traditions, nor do they try to explain away the Prophet's motives. They were after money, not armies, booty, not converts. You may be wondering why none of the Ansari joined the Muslim immigrants from Mecca on either of these raids. I believe the answer is that they hadn't been Muslims long enough, and therefore they still knew right from wrong. Islam had already corrupted the Meccan Muslims to the point that they thought piracy and terror were justifiable, even admirable. Kind of reminds us of modern-day Islamic terrorists.
Ishaq. Then the apostle went raiding in the month of Rabi'ul Awwal. making for the Quraysh. He turned to Medina without fighting. Then he raided the Quraysh by way of Dinar. Tabari. In this year, the messenger entrusted to Sa'd a white war banner for the expedition of Qarar. Sa'd said, I set out on foot at the head of 20 men. We used to lie hidden by day and march at night, until we reached Qarar on the 5th morning. The caravan had arrived in town a day before. There were 60 men with it. Those who were with Sa'd were all emigrants.
Muhammad is now a serial offender, a committed pirate and terrorist, albeit a failed one.
Tabari. The messenger of Allah went out on a raid as far as Wadan, searching for the Quraysh, in the course of which the Banu Damrah made a treaty of friendship with him. Then Muhammad returned to Mecca without any fighting and remained there for the rest of the month.
This time Muhammad took command himself, with the express intent of finding the Quraysh and robbing them. And while it is noble that he inked a treaty of friendship, even this was the wrong thing for a prophet to do. Treaties are political, not religious. Muhammad was now considered a fellow chief, commanding a band of armed men. Hardly prophet-like. And besides, the Quran would ultimately say that treaties with unbelieving infidels weren't binding on Muslims. This alliance was with pagans.
Tabari. During this stay, he sent Ubaidah at the head of 60 horsemen from the immigrants without a single Ansari among them. He got as far as the watering place in Hijaz,
which is Central Arabia,
below the pass of Marah. There he met a band of Quraysh, but there was no fighting except Sa'd shot an arrow. Then the two groups separated from one another, the Muslims leaving a rear guard.
Islamic raiders marched with the intent to plunder and kill. The only thing that stopped them from achieving their objective was the sight of a superior force. As we seek to defend ourselves today, we would do well to keep this in mind.
Tabari. Muhammad led an expedition
in the month of
Rabi al-Akhir in search of the Quraysh. He went as far as Buat in the region of Radwa, and then returned without any fighting. Then he led another expedition in search of the Meccans. He took the mountain track and crossed the desert. Halting beneath a tree in Batha, he prayed there.
What on earth was he praying for? Oh God, please help me rob and kill these people. Thank you, amen.
After a few days, the Prophet went out in pursuit of the Quds.
The Islamic era was but a year old, yet Muslims were fully committed to the path of piracy and terror. Forget for a moment that this was supposed to be a religion. There was nothing noble, moral, or redeeming about raiding parties seeking to plunder civilian caravans, or expeditions marching off to terrorize unsuspecting villagers. Just as there was no redeeming surah in Mecca, there is no virtuous behavior in Medina. I haven't cherry-picked the ugly parts out of a sea of religious activities. I have reported everything. The second year of the Islamic era began as the first one ended. The opening headline reads,
Tabari. Expeditions led by Allah's Messenger.
This was followed by,
In this year, according to all Sirah writers, the Messenger personally led the Ghazwa of Alwa.
A Ghazwa is an Islamic invasion in Allah's cause, consisting of a large army unit led by the Prophet himself.
He left Sa'd in command of Medina. On this raid, his banner was carried by Hamza. He stayed out for 15 days and then returned to Medina.
This was the 8th failed terrorist attack in as many months. There are two interesting subtleties here. First, Sa'd, Chairman Muhammad's most fierce warrior, was left in command of Medina because the Prophet had become a warlord. And considering the nature of the Islamic world today, that made him a role model. Second, the religion of Islam actually coined a word to define an armed raid personally led by its prophet. There's something very perverse about that.
According to Wikidi, the messenger went out on a Ghazwa raid at the head of 200 of his companions in October 623 and reached Buat. His intention was to intercept a Quraysh caravan with 100 men and 2,500 camels.
This expedition was neither a military operation, nor was it defensive, and it most assuredly wasn't religious. It was an act of terrorism against a civilian economic activity. And the pirate was after booty. The Hadith reports,
In this year, Muhammad set forth the emigrants to intercept a Quraysh caravan en route to Syria. His war banner was carried by Hamza.
It also failed. The score was Muslim militants 0, infidels 10. Unfortunately, Islam would get far better at this game than they ever got at religion.
Ishaq and Tabari. Ali and I were with the messenger on the Ghazwa at Ushaira. We halted on one occasion and saw some men of the Banu Mudi working in one of their date groves. I said, why don't we go and see how they work? So we went and watched them for a while. Then we felt drowsy and went to sleep on the dusty ground under the trees. Muhammad woke us, arriving as we were covered in dust. He stirred Ali with his foot and said, Arise, O dusty one! Shall I tell you who was the most wretched man? Ammar of Thamud, for he slaughtered the she-camel, and he shall strike you here. Muhammad put his hand on the side of Ali's head until he was soaked from it. Then he grabbed his beard.
The Quran claims that the Thamudic nation was destroyed by Allah because someone hamstrung a camel. While it's odd that he liked camels more than men, there's a bigger perversion still in this tale of misplaced ambition. The Muslims were so unfamiliar with honest labor, they went to watch someone work. And they were so lazy, they fell asleep while they were doing it. Ultimately, that is why the pirates were there in the first place. When the bedraggled Muslim refugees migrated north, they became dependent upon handouts. They were physically able to do work, since they went off on terrorist raids, and the oasis town of Yathrib was a bustling agricultural and commercial center, so there was plenty of work being done. All of which leads to a conclusion. Something in Islam made the Muslims unwilling to work, and it affects them to this day. Islamic states have the lowest per capita productivity of any nations in the world. Islam politically and economically is as faulty as the religion is false. It's lose-lose.
Ishaq. Meanwhile, the apostle sent Sa'd on the raid of Abu Waqas. The prophet only stayed a few nights in Medina before raiding Ushaira and then Kurs.
Let's review Bukhari's Book of Maghazi to get a better feel for what's happening.
Bukhari. Allah's apostle said, A time will come when a group of Muslims will wage holy war, and it will be said, Is there anyone who has accompanied Allah's apostle? They will say, Yes, and so victory will be bestowed upon them. The apostle said, Tomorrow I will give the flag to a man whose leadership Allah will use to grant a Muslim victory. I fought in 7 Ghazwat battles along with the Prophet, and fought in 9 Maghazi raids in armies dispatched by the Prophet.
There was nothing spiritual about fundamental Islam.
Bukhari. I heard Sa'd saying, I was the first Arab to shoot an arrow in Allah's cause. I witnessed a scene that was dearer to me than anything I had ever seen. Aswad came to the Prophet while Muhammad was urging Muslims to fight the pagans. He said, We shall fight on your right and on your left, and in front of you and behind you. I saw the face of the Prophet getting bright with happiness, for that saying delighted him. Bukhari. The believers who did not join in the Ghazwa and those who fought are not equal in reward. Allah's apostle said, When your enemy comes near, shoot at them, but use your arrows sparingly, so that they are not wasted. Allah's wrath became severe on anyone the Prophet killed in Allah's cause.
While the terrorist raids were hardly religious, religious symbolism and rewards were used to solicit and inspire the new combatants.
Bukhari. Muhammad led the fear prayer with one batch of his army, while the other batch faced the enemy. Bukhari. The Prophet said, This is Gabriel holding the head of his horse, equipped with arms for battle. Allah's apostle used to say, None has the right to be worshipped except Allah alone, because He has honored His warriors and made His messengers victorious. He alone defeated the infidel clans, so there is nothing left. Bukhari. A man came to the prophet and said, "Can you tell me where I will go if I get martyred?" The prophet replied, "To paradise." The man fought till he was martyred.
There are no such bargains in Yahweh's scriptures. Killing is not an express ticket to heaven. Yeshua never asked his followers to slay anyone. The Messiah mentions killing only once. He tells a parable about a ruler in the final days of the tribulation to encourage his followers to be productive, not destructive. Allah especially hated Christians and Jews, ordering Muslims to fight them until they were wiped out to the last. This is fundamental Islam, the very core of Muhammad's message. That said, there is one Bible verse that appears to be both open-ended and to encourage violence. As such, Psalm 149 became the rallying cry for the Crusades. In actuality, it's prophetic, speaking of what's called the tribulation and of the return of the Messiah. In the fashion of Hebrew poetry, the psalm presents a series of 9 couplets, pairs of phrases that say the same thing, but in different words. Let's review them. The first couplet speaks prophetically of the new millennium, of the church and of saints. Praise Yahweh, sing unto Yahweh a fresh song, and sing his praise in the congregation of saints. The second celebrates the end of the tribulation and the Messiah's return. Let Israel rejoice in Yahweh who made them. Let the children of Israel be joyful in their king. Then, let them praise Yahweh's character and dance. Let them sing praises unto Yahweh with the tambourine and harp. Speaking of the Messiah's gift of salvation, the next reports, For Yahweh is pleased with his people. He will glorify the meek with salvation. The fifth couplet reveals, Let the saints be joyful in this glorious honor. Let them shout from their resting place. At the Messiah's return, the souls of the saints will be raised from their graves. A Catholic pope misinterpreted the 6th verse to advance his personal agenda. Let the exaltation of the Almighty be in their mouths, and a 2-edged sword be in their open hand. A 2-edged sword is the Bible's metaphor for divine judgment or for rendering a godly verdict. That's why it's in an open hand, which could not wield an instrument of violence. Its pair in the couplet references the exalted words of the Almighty, suggesting an oral verdict, not a slashing weapon. The 7th pair proclaims, To advance vengeance upon the nations and punishment upon the people. This speaks to the final judgment of Yahweh on those who attack Israel during World War III, midway through the tribulation. It's interesting in that the predicted Magog war against Israel is perpetrated entirely by Muslims. This is followed by, To yoke kings together, bringing them forth, and those who are severe will be tied with iron twine. In other words, following God's verdict, the purveyors of false doctrines, those who are severe, will be restrained. The final couplet reveals, To advance the verdict upon them, prescribed by the splendor of the saints. Praise Yahweh. The entire psalm is prophetic, speaking of the final judgment of nations following the Messiah's return in power and glory. There is no command to fight or kill anyone. Since Islam's principal defense is to claim that Christians have performed no better, especially during the Crusades, I want to bring your attention to 2 incredibly important historical facts. First, Pope Benedict IX. He reigned in 1033 A.D., precisely 1,000 years after Christ's resurrection. Benedict became, like Muhammad, demonic, fixated on the occult, demented, delirious, and lascivious. The church became corrupt, focused on rituals, suppression, and money. With power-hungry men at the helm, it splintered, ultimately causing cleric and king to send men off on foolhardy crusades. The second historical fact is that the Crusaders weren't Christians. They couldn't have been. 4 centuries had passed since the last sermon was given in a language common to the people of Europe. The first Bible to be printed in the vulgar tongue was John Wycliffe's, yet it wouldn't find quill for another 4 centuries. To be a Christian, one must know Christ. He could not have been known to the men who fought. They carried his symbols, nothing more. Returning to the 7th century in Medina, Muhammad was back on the warpath.
Tabari and Ishaq. The messenger sent Abdallah out with a detachment of 8 men of the immigrants without any Ansari or helpers among them. He wrote a letter, but ordered him not to look at it until he had traveled for 2 days. Then he was to carry out what he was commanded to do. When Abdallah opened the letter, it said, "March until you reach Nakhla, between Mecca and Taif. Lie in wait for the Quraysh there, and find out for us what they are doing."
The letter suggests that there was treachery among the treacherous. One or more Muslims was spilling the beans and tipping off the Quraysh before the militants could rob them.
Having read the letter, Abdallah said, "To hear is to obey." He told his companions, "The Prophet commanded me to go to Nakhla and lie in wait for the Quraysh."
To
lie in wait
is an order to kill. I present Allah as an authority. Here is Quran 9:5.
When the prohibited months for fighting are over, slay the pagans wherever you find them. Take them captive and besiege them. Lie in wait for them in every likely place.
Abdallah tells his fellow militants,
"The Prophet has forbidden me to compel you, so whoever desires martyrdom, let him come with me. If not, retreat. I am going to carry out the Prophet's orders."
Martyrdom, the word that manufactures terrorists faster than the world can rid itself of them, was spoken for the first time. No word has ever held such dire consequences for abused or abuser. The Islamic concept of martyrdom was twisted. Muhammad took a good word and made it bad. Prior to Islam, a martyr willingly sacrificed his or her life to save others, not kill them. A Christian martyr sought nothing. Their lives served as a living witness so that others might know the value of their faith. They died with Scripture in their hands, not swords. The Greek word martus, from which martyr was derived, means witness. Yet at Muhammad's direction it came to mean murderer. Muslims obtained martyrdom by terrorizing others, murdering millions. Muslim martyrs are mercenaries, wielding swords in pursuit of plunder. I believe this is Satan's signature once again. He is the world's most acclaimed counterfeiter. Martyrdom is good, but not as a pirate. Money is good, but not when it's plundered. Sex is good, but not as an act of pedophilia. Profits are good, but not when they are motivated by profit. Scripture is good, but not when it's perverted. Prayer is good, but not when one prostrates oneself to the devil.
Ishaq. His companions went with him. Not one of them stayed behind.
A second hadith says,
"Whoever desires death, let him go on and make his will. I am making my will, and acting on the orders of the messenger of Allah." Tabari. They made their way through the Hijaz until Saad and Utbah lost a camel which they were taking turns riding. They stayed behind to look for it. The rest went on until they reached Nakhla. A Meccan caravan went past them, carrying raisins, leather, and other merchandise, which the Quraysh traded. When they saw the Muslims, they were afraid of them. Then one of the Muslims came into view. They saw that he had shaved his head, and they felt safer. The Quraysh said, "They are on their way to the Umrah, the lesser pilgrimage. There is nothing to fear."
The pagan Umrah had become part of Islam. However, shaving one's head was used to venerate Allat, not Allah. So the Quraysh were confused as I am. Why would a Muslim militant venerate a pagan idol while pursuing plunder in Allah's name?
Ishaq. The Muslim raiders consulted one another concerning them, this being the last day of Rajab.
Rajab, like Ramadan, was a holy month on the pagan calendar. Fighting, looting, and general mayhem were prohibited. It is troubling that the observance of a pagan rite was a limiting factor, while thievery and murder were not. This says a great deal about the nature of Islam.
One of the Muslims said, "By Allah, if we leave these people alone tonight, they will get into the Haram, the sacred territory of Mecca, and they will be safely out of our reach. If we kill them, we will have killed in the sacred month."
The debate was between paganism and criminal behavior. Islam had nothing to do with Muhammad's mission.
Tabari. They hesitated and were afraid to advance on them, but then they plucked up courage and agreed to kill as many as they could and to seize what they had with them.
This isn't the least bit ambiguous. The first Muslims, Muhammad's disciples, were about to conduct a terrorist raid with the intent to loot and to kill.
Waqid ibn Abdallah shot an arrow at Ammar and killed him. Uthman bin Abdallah and Al-Hakam surrendered, but Nawfal ibn Abdallah escaped and eluded them. Then Abdallah and his companions took the caravan and the captives back to Allah's apostle in Medina.
Islam had drawn first blood. The score was now Islam 1, infidels 11. The Hadith says,
"This was the first booty taken by the companions of Muhammad."
Reading the passage carefully, we find that there are 4 slaves to Allah in the raid. 2 were Muslims, and 2 were infidels. It is yet another drop in an ocean of evidence that Allah was a pagan deity, a common rock idol. Abd Allah said of his adventure,
Ishaq, "Our lances drank of Amr's blood and lit the flame of war." Tabari and Ishaq. Abdallah told his companions, "A fifth of the booty we have taken belongs to the apostle." This was before Allah made surrendering a fifth of the booty taken a requirement.
Quran 8:41, a verse from a surah dedicated to booty, says that Muhammad was entitled to 1/5 of whatever Muslims looted. The 69th verse proclaims,
"The use of such spoils is lawful and good."
The fact Abd Allah announced this partitioning of booty years in advance of the Quranic endorsement suggests that the idea was Muhammad's, and that he made up a verse to ratify his claim. Money is a powerful motivator.
He set aside a fifth of the booty for Allah's messenger and divided the rest between his companions. Allah made the booty permissible. He divided the loot, awarding 4/5 to the men he had allowed to take it. He gave 1/5 to his apostle.
If there were any doubt as to why the first Muslim militants were off on their 12th raid in 12 months, it should have been eliminated with this line. Their mission had nothing to do with religion, nor did Muhammad's. It had always been about the money. Religion was simply a tool, a veil, a distraction, a means to legitimize murder and mayhem. Muhammad's raiders weren't religious zealots. They were mercenaries at best, pirates at worst. And lest we forget, they were now murderers, kidnappers, and thieves. When the raiders returned to Yathrib, they were blindsided by a raging controversy. Both the immigrants and the helpers were horrified, deeply troubled by the breach of the holy month protections. Even the most despicable bandits refrained from thievery during Rajab. And I suppose they may have been bothered by the fact that they had murdered, robbed, and kidnapped their kin. This societal disdain put the wannabe prophet in a quandary. Muhammad was broke, and poor dictators don't last very long. But if he accepted the booty, he would trash his already shaky religious credentials. He was on his heels and teetering from the Quraysh bargain, the satanic verses, the knight's journey, and the migration of shame. Stooping to the level of a scoundrel, a murderous pirate, a two-bit terrorist, so desperate for money that he would steal during Rajab, was one blow too many. So what to do? His first ploy was to betray his troops, something Muslim suicide bombers should keep in mind the next time they contemplate murdering their way to paradise.
Tabari. When they reached the prophet, he said, "I did not order you to fight in the sacred month." He impounded the caravan and the 2 captives and refused to take anything from them.
The prospect of
martyrdom
and
lying in wait
confirms that Muhammad had sent his Muslim raiders out to fight, as did the requirement of making out their wills. The
division of spoils
agreement indicates that he had given his authorization for them to steal. The lying prophet was buying time, which is why he didn't send the booty back. He was trying to find a way to keep the money and maintain his dwindling prestige.
When Allah's messengers said this, they were aghast and thought that they were doomed. The Muslims rebuked them severely for what they had done. They said, "You have done what you were not commanded to do, and have fought in the sacred month."
To salvage his reputation, and thus cling to his position of power, Muhammad made his men scapegoats. His letter confirmed his complicity. He had sent them out in Rajab, the idolaters' sacred month. The act made him an accessory to murder and a thief. The denial made him a pagan and a liar, something far more lethal to a person pretending to be a prophet.
Tabari and Ishaq. The Quraysh said, "Muhammad and his companions have violated the sacred month, shed blood, seized property, and taken men captive." The polytheists spread lying slander concerning him, saying, "Muhammad claims that he is following obedience to Allah, yet he is the first to violate the holy month and to kill our companion in Rajab."
The pagans knew that breaking treaties, murder, kidnapping, and thievery were wrong. It's a shame that Islam's lone prophet didn't. I find it especially revealing that when the Meccans told the truth about what had just happened, they were called
lying slanderers.
This has devastating implications for the totality of the Quran. Its second most repetitive theme is the never-ending argument. The Meccans said that Muhammad was a demon-possessed liar, not a prophet. They said that he had forged the Quran to serve his personal ambitions. They appeared to be right, and yet Islam's dark spirit called them lying slanderers. In this circumstance, the Meccans were absolutely right, and yet Muhammad deployed the same strategy. At the very least, this suggests that the Hadith and Quran had the same speechwriter, the same agenda, and the same wanton disregard for truth. It also tells us that those who knew this prophet far better than we could possibly know him today saw him as a terrorist raider, an immoral thug, and as a liar.
Tabari. The Muslims who were still in Mecca refuted this.
It was embarrassing. It meant that they had placed their trust in a man unworthy of it.
Ishaq. The Jews, seeing in this an omen unfavorable to Muhammad, said, "Muslims killing Meccans means war is kindled." There was much talk of this. However, Allah turned it to their disadvantage. When the Muslims repeated what the Jews had said, Allah revealed a Quran to his messenger. "They question you with regard to warfare in the sacred month. Say, war therein is serious, but keeping people from Islam, from the sacred month, and driving them out is more serious with Allah."
This became Quran 2:217.
The Muslims now knew that seduction was worse than killing.
Considering the facts, this was an inane excuse for violating treaties, kidnapping, theft, and murder. The Meccan merchants were minding their business. They weren't seducing anyone. Once again, the prophet behaves badly, and it's the pagan's fault, not his own.
Ishaq. When the Quran passage concerning this matter was revealed, and Allah relieved Muslims of their fear and anxiety, Muhammad took possession of the caravan and prisoners. The Quraysh sent him a ransom, but the Prophet said, "We will not release them to you on payment of ransom until our companions, Sa'd and Utbah, get back, for we are afraid you may harm them. If you kill them, we will kill your friends." They came back, however, and the Prophet released the prisoners on payment of ransom. When the Quran authorization came down to Muhammad, Abdallah and his companions were relieved because and they became anxious for an additional reward. They said, "Will this raid be counted as part of the reward promised to Muslim combatants?" So Allah sent down this Quran. Those who believe and have fought in Allah's cause may receive Allah's mercy. Allah made the booty permissible. He divided the loot, awarding 4/5 to the men he had allowed to take it. He gave 1/5 to his apostle.
Mercy for murderers, rewards for raiders, loot for profiteers. Allah's cause has been defined for the first time, and it's directly linked to a terrorist raid, one in which Muslim militants attacked civilians. They committed capital murder, kidnapping, and armed robbery. Islam was not preached. Instead, Islam was used to motivate the bandits and reward the prophet. The religion prompted barbarism rather than discourage it. This incident alone destroys Islam's religious credentials, Muhammad's authority, and Allah's credibility. God justifying criminal acts to satisfy a prophet's financial lust is unfathomable. If we are to believe Muhammad, Allah approved murder, terror, thievery, and kidnapping for ransom. Forget for a moment that this dark spirit was demented. This is immoral. An immoral God cannot be trusted. An immoral deity isn't worthy of a religion, devotion, sacrifice, or martyrdom. The same is true of an immoral prophet. Muhammad had sent out armed brigades in search of Quraysh, hoping to terrorize them and rob their caravans. When his militants succeeded, he betrayed his mercenaries to save his own hide, yet he still took the money. He threatened to kill his kin and ransom them back to his tribe. Then he claimed that his God approved his hellish behavior, which is the biggest crime of all. The only thing more devastating than a man professing situational scriptures to legitimize terror, murder, robbery, and kidnapping for ransom is to lure billions to their doom by implying these words were inspired by God. By so doing, Muhammad confirmed my theory. Islam was nothing more than the profitable prophet plan. According to the Sirah, Muhammad was a con man. There have been millions of murderers, millions of kidnappers, millions of terrorists. There have been millions of sexual predators. Thieves are a dime a dozen. There have been a score of men who have done these things while claiming to be anointed by God. Yet only one invented a religion and falsified scripture to satiate his demonic cravings. This is why Muhammad, Islam's lone prophet, qualifies as the most evil man to have ever lived.
For years, I have been denouncing political correctness. For years, I have been warning people across America that political correctness is aiding and abetting the advance of radical Islam on our soil. I launched Act for America because I realized we must come together to mobilize the nation, to educate the nation, to make a difference. And at this point of my presentation, I want to move about why I'm so concerned about the education system in our country and what's happening, how the radicals right now are trying to brainwash the children in our country. And this is why we are seeing a rise of homegrown terrorism. People wonder, how can we in the last 2 years have arrested over 75 homegrown terrorists, all Muslims, either born into the Islamic faith or have converted to Islam, trying to attack the United States or carry terrorist attacks against America. Over 75 homegrown terrorists. How did this happen? How did these good people, good Americans, some of them born as Baptist and raised as Baptist like Bledsoe here in Nashville, how can these people become so radicalized to the point where they are hating our country so much they are willing to die to kill Americans? And I'm going to shift right now as to what's happening in this country in education. We talked a lot today about Sharia and the threat of Sharia and our court system, what's happening militarily. We know that they want to attack us. We know they are advancing Sharia and what Sharia is all about. But here is what's happening on the educational level and how they are trying to change our society culturally from within in order to destroy our society. And I'm going to begin with what's happening on college campuses with the infiltration of our country. I call our universities right now occupied territories. People ask me, what's happening with the universities, especially if you have a child in a university? People in the heartland pinch pennies, save their money, eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches so they can send their children to college to get an education, to have the American dream, only to find out they're sending them to the lion's den. The children come back home, they are completely changed. They loathe America, they do not like America, they're apologizing for America, and you wonder what happened to my children. Here's what happened to your children. You see, there is an Islamic agenda that has been in operation for a very long time. And you have heard today the Muslim Brotherhood mentioned and a lecture about the Muslim Brotherhood. What's been happening with the universities, with the education system, is because of the oil wealth in the Middle East, the Muslims have been able to pour millions of dollars into our universities, setting up Middle East study department and political science department, and appointing Arab professors who are anti-America and anti-Israel, who are brainwashing our students into believing America is bad, Israel is evil, and we've got, they are embarrassed and apologizing for the country. Here is the extent of the Saudi peddling that has taken place in our country. King Fahd of Saudi Arabia has donated $20 million to set up a Middle East study department at the University of Arkansas. $5 million donated to Berkeley's Middle East department from 2 Saudi sheikhs linked to Al-Qaeda. Harvard received $22.5 million. 28.1 million went to Georgetown. 11 million went to Cornell. 5 million went to MIT, 1.5 million to Texas A&M, 1 million to Princeton. Rutgers received 5 million share endowment, as did Columbia, who tried to lie to conceal the source of the fund. Other recipients of Saudi-tainted monies include UC Santa Barbara, Johns Hopkins University, Rice University, American University, University of Chicago, USC, UCLA, Duke University, Syracuse University, Howard University, and many, many others. I can go on and on, you get the picture. From the Ivy League to the community colleges and everything in between. We pump the gas and they pump poison into the hearts and minds of our future generation. And this is why we must become energy independent and cut off the money thing to the Saudis. The way they're doing it is they're using a loophole called Title VI program, which was started by our government after World War II to educate American students about foreign cultures and foreign languages so they may be an asset to our country, especially those who want to get into the diplomatic field and work for the State Department. This is how they are able to get this money into our universities. And this is why, when you look at the news and the media and the mainstream media and you think to yourself, why is the media so biased? Why can't they see what we see? The reason why is because for the last 16 years, all these students graduating out of our Ivy League colleges who have been fed a steady diet of resentment against America and against Israel are today the bureau chiefs, the news writers, the news anchors, the news reporters who are reporting on these things. We shouldn't be surprised. They are the opinion shapers and makers. Unfortunately, they do not realize how they get to this point of thinking this way. The problem does not stop there. The radical Islamic agenda in the country thought the strategy worked so well on college campus, why wait until the kids get to college? Why don't we start educating the children when they are in middle school? So the Council on Islamic Education started advising America's book publishers on how to portray Islam in public schools. They started consulting with Houghton Mifflin and McGraw-Hill and Random House, who write the social studies books and the history books on how to teach Islam in the public school system. They're doing exactly what Hitler did. What did Hitler say? What did Hitler do? Give me the children, I'll change society in 10 years. And for those of you who have been watching what's happening, the attitude of the youth of America against America, you are seeing the results of years of education, of the radical agenda happening in our educational system, and years of apathy on our part, sitting on the sidelines and not paying attention how we're losing our universities and our schools. Here's what's happening with the public school system. They started now teaching a course on Islam in 7th grade. The course is a 3-week course where Johnny and Sally have to adopt Muslim names, become Muslims for 3 weeks, memorize and recite verses from the Quran, fast for Ramadan if they can, for 1 day to experience what it's like to be a Muslim, and then go to a mosque on a field trip. Here's what the course says. You know, before when I would speak about these things, people would say to me, absolutely baloney. This could not be happening. We have separation in church and state in this country. So I decided there is nothing like show and tell. So here is the course. It is the course of Islam. So here's how the course started. And before I start, by the way, don't get me wrong. I want my children to be educated about Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam. I want my kids to get an all-rounded education about all religions. But let me do the nitty-gritty at home, in my own home, when I want to teach them about what my kids want to learn. So here's how the course starts. The course starts with the teacher giving instructions to the students about the class. From the beginning, you and your classmates will become Muslims. You will be a member of a caravan. The teacher instructions continue. Dressing as a Muslim and trying to be involved will increase your learning and enjoyment. Finally, trying your best in all tasks will guarantee you an excellent grade and a more enjoyable time. The teacher is already dangling the great carrot in front of the children. Here are the list of Islamic names that the children have to choose from. Abdullah, Khalid, Hassan, Hamza, Ibrahim, Arafat, Khadija, Maryam, Noor, Amina, etc. Here are what they called wisdom cards, which is exercise cards that the children have to study at school, just like they study with math cards or whatever, in order for them to understand their lessons. This card that I'm going to use as an example in particular, and there's many of them pages upon pages, but it talks about jihad. Because jihad has become a word that we are all very familiar with. We have heard a lot, because every terrorist that either blew himself up or committed suicide or martyrdom or did a video of his last rite before he blows himself up, he talks about jihad fi sabilillah. He is dying in the path of Allah. Here's what they're teaching our students about jihad. A jihad is a struggle by Muslims against oppression, invasion, and injustice. This is a fact card. Now, if these words sound familiar to you, it's because they are the talking points of Al-Qaeda and the Palestinian Authority and Hamas or whatever. Every time they talk about why they're fighting the West, why they're fighting America, they are fighting injustice, they are fighting oppression, they are fighting invasion. Our children in 7th grade in public schools in the United States right now are being taught the talking points of our enemies as facts in our public schools, and we, the taxpayers, are paying for it. And by the way, the word jihad is mentioned in the Quran 40 times, 36 times out of 40 as a war, as a holy war against the infidels to either kill them or subjugate them. So the kids are taught flat lies. And here's the kicker some of you will appreciate, especially, it's amazing that we're doing this at church. Here is the Shahada, or the Islamic salvation prayer. When somebody wants to convert to Islam and wants to become a Muslim, this is what they say. It is the equivalent to the Christian prayer of, I accept Jesus into my heart as my Lord and Savior, etc. Here's what the kids have to analyze in the classroom. They have to analyze this prayer. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful. Praise be to Allah, Lord of creation, the compassionate, the merciful, King of Judgment Day. You alone we worship, and to you alone we pray for help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom you have favored, not of those who have incurred your wrath, which is the Jews, nor of those who have gone astray, which is the atheists and the Christians. Can you imagine if the pastor here goes to a school, to a public school, and says, hey y'all, we're going to study the Bible for 3 weeks. You are going to have Judeo-Christian names like Michael and Sarah, and we're going to memorize and recite verses from the Bible, and you're going to try to fast for 1 day to experience Good Friday or Yom Kippur, so you'll know what it's like to come from that heritage, and then you're going to come on Sunday to church service to experience what it's like to be a Muslim. Can you imagine what would happen to that pastor? Hell will break loose. The ACLU will scream up in arms. Again, I am all for religious education at school, but this is indoctrination and it's unacceptable. This is exactly why we have separation between church and state. Do not mix the two together. Here is some of the exercises in the class as well. Become a Muslim warrior during the Crusades or during an ancient jihad. Explain weapons, tactics, etc. Excuse me? This is a class exercise? And we are sitting here everybody is afraid to say anything lest we offend somebody? I believe political correctness needs to be thrown in the garbage where it belongs and start calling a spade a spade. Yeah, I'm talking to the right people. What made America great is people like us who came from all over the world to become Americans. Your great-grandparents, your grandparents, your parents, or yourself if you are a first-generation immigrant like me. We are a melting pot. If you look across this room, you'll see a tapestry of different colors, different backgrounds, different heritage, different religion, different everything. But we came all together here to be Americans. So we can love this country, so we can be free. We have all our shortcomings. No country is great. But we all work together and come together to make sure we protect and we secure this country and keep it as a beacon of light to those people coming from the rest of the world so they can enjoy what we all enjoyed, whether we are a first-generation immigrant or not. And I say to those people who criticize America, who hate America, who think so ill of America, if America is so bad, by all means we'll give you a one-way ticket and go out and go to whatever country you choose and leave it to us. No one is perfect. We all have our shortcomings. But we all have to take care of our home and our family. And that's the people of the United States and this great country that our founding fathers have set up for us. People come here speaking different languages, different nationalities. I am sick and tired when I hear people say, I'm an African American, and I'm a Japanese American, and I'm Italian American. I am nothing but an American. And unless we get back to that point, we're going to lose our country. And while I'm on a roll, English is the official language of the United States and shall remain so. When people hear about the Middle East, they think all the countries in the Middle East are Muslim countries. This was not the case 30 years ago. Lebanon was the only majority Christian country in the Middle East. Lebanon was the most westernized modern country in the Middle East. When we got our independence from France in the early 40s, the majority of the population were Christian. The Muslims were the minority. We prospered, we built the country, we are the descendants of the Phoenicians, we were good in commerce, and in a very short period of time, Lebanon became Paris of the Middle East, the banking capital of the Middle East. We had the best universities in the Middle East, the best education centers, the best schools, the best theaters. We exported the theater and the art to the rest of the Arabic world. That's why a lot of Arabic countries understand the Lebanese dialect through our culture, but while we do not understand many of theirs. We had open borders. We were a very multicultural society. We allowed people to come into our country freely and study in our country. They usually graduated and stayed there because our country offered them the best economic perspective for a job in the Middle East, even though we didn't have any oil. That was Lebanon. The situation began to change gradually as the Muslims started growing and becoming more than 50% of society. We, the Christians, do not multiply as much, while the Muslims, a lot of them are allowed to marry up to 4 wives at a time. This is how they multiplied. We started shrinking, they started growing. The most famous Muslim in the world today is Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden is 1 out of 53 children. He himself has 27 children. Between father and son, they have produced 80 children. This is what tipped the scale in the Middle East over the years. And we always had our problem controlled with the Muslims until the influx of the Palestinians out of Jordan, when King Hussein kicked them out of Jordan in Black September. And actually King Hussein killed more Palestinians in Black September than the state of Israel has killed in all its existence. Lebanon, not surprisingly, being a country based on Judeo-Christian values with open borders and multicultural attitude, took the Palestinians in. We were the only country in the Middle East who took the Palestinians in for the third wave of refugees in 1970. Once they came in, they put their heads together with the radical Islamists in our country and declared holy war on the Christians. Yasser Arafat tried to establish in Lebanon a base from which to attack Israel, something he tried to do in Jordan and failed because of the Jordanian dictatorship by the king. Yet he was able to do it in Lebanon, using our laws, our multiculturalism, our tolerance, and our open-mindedness against us. The problem worsened by 1974. Christians became prisoners to their homes and towns. We stopped traveling. I would ask my parents, how come we're not going to Beirut this year for Christmas? Because the rest of my family lived in Beirut. And my father would give me an excuse, well, we decided to stay home this year. The reason why we stopped traveling is because the Muslims and the Palestinians would set up checkpoints and would stop cars driving. And they would look at the people's IDs. And in Lebanon, as in throughout the Middle East, our religion is identified on our ID. You are either a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew. So when the Palestinians and the Muslims would stop the car and see that this family is a Christian family, they would get them out of the car and shoot them in cold blood. It was called identity killing at the time. We stopped traveling. That's why we became prisoners. By 1975, the Palestinians and the Muslims formed an army called Jaysh Lebanon al-Arabi, the Arabic Lebanese army, and started taking over the military bases and destroying the Lebanese infrastructure and attacking the Lebanese government institutions. The army base above my house in South Lebanon was the last army base left in the country, in the hands of the Lebanese army. This was in 1975. They grouped their people together, and in trying to take over the military base in my town, they bombed my home, bringing it down and burying me under the rubble. This was in 1975. I was wounded. I ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months and undergone surgeries. And I would ask my parents, why did they do this to us? And my father would tell me, because we are Christians. The Muslims consider us infidels. So I learned at a very young age, at age 10 years old, that I am wanted dead simply because I was born into the Christian faith. I left the hospital and I came home, and my home was no longer the home I left. I ended up living in a bomb shelter, underground, with no electricity, no water, and very little food. To get some water, we would crawl to a nearby spring under snipers' bullets, my mother and I, in a ditch, and we would get to the spring, and my mother had to use the stocking on top of the bottle of water to catch all the worms and all the rocks and all the maggots so we can drink the water. And then we would crawl back to the bomb shelter. Before we left, every time we would say our last goodbyes because we did not know if we're going to come back alive or dead. We didn't have any food. My mother finally crawled up to our storage place and brought down rice, dried and dried lentils and dried chickpeas. And she would soak them overnight so we can eat. And this was the food we lived on. The only greenery we had to eat was the grass that grew around our bomb shelter. I would crawl out under the bombs and I would dig grass out. And I learned how to peel the thorn so I can eat the stalk with my ripe hands of 12 years old so I can eat the green stalk inside the thorn. That was the only greenery we ate. We had no heat. We would freeze. We are in the mountains. We are next to the border of Israel. My father had to break twigs from trees and pour kerosene and benzene on them in the middle of our bomb shelter, our 8 by 10 room where we lived underground. And many times we would cuddle around the fire, and many times we would fall asleep. And we had an agreement. Whoever woke up first would drag the other two outside and slap them on their face to wake up because of carbon monoxide poisoning. We would pass out. This was my life. Meanwhile, we were surrounded by the Palestinians and the Muslims who want to slaughter us. And we knew what our fate was going to be because we knew what they were doing to the Christian towns in Lebanon as they overtaken the country. People that have fled from the rest of Lebanon who came to our area would tell us what they were doing in the other parts of Lebanon. One of the famous massacres is the massacre of the Moor. They massacred many Christians. They would walk into a bomb shelter, meaning the Islamists and the Palestinians. They would find the family hiding in a bomb shelter. They would find a mother and a father with a little baby. They would take the baby, tie one leg of the baby to the mother and another leg to the father, and pull the parents apart, splitting the child in half. They would walk into our churches, urinate and defecate on the altar using the Bibles as toilet paper. The last lady that worked for me was completely mentally disturbed. I hired her so I can take care of her and her family. They tied her to a chair. They tied her 16-year-old son on her lap, held a knife to her hand, and made her behead him before they raped her 2 daughters in front of her. I think the biggest disservice the American media did to the American public is not show them the beheading of Daniel Pearl and Nick Berg. I think we in America as a civilization need to understand the barbaric nature of the enemy we are facing that's heading our way. Few people from my town, knowing what our fate was going to be, went to Israel, who was supposedly the enemy at the time. Israel was supposedly Lebanon's enemy, according to the government-controlled media. But we as Christians, our back was to the Jews, Israel. Our front was to the Palestinians and the Muslims. And we knew of the 2 evils, of the 2 devils, the Jews are not going to slaughter us because we had more shared values with them than we had with the radical Islamists and the Palestinians. Few people from my town went to Israel and begged for help. And Israel started coming in the middle of the night from 1976 till 1978. Bringing food for the children, bringing bomb shelters to the people who didn't have a bomb shelter, bringing blankets to the family, bringing medication, bringing food for the military, bringing ammunition to the Christians, and teaching them how to fight, taking them into Israel to be trained. Because the Christian Lebanese had college degrees, had education, they were not street gangs. And you can have all the college degrees on your wall behind you, your doctorates, your law degree, and everything else. It doesn't do you squat when you are faced with an enemy who believes that beheading you is an order from Allah. And this is how we stayed alive for another 2 years. Until 1978. One day, one of our militia members, the Christian militia in the south, came to us and he said, I just want to let you know that tonight we're going to be attacked. And we may die because we had lost so many people and I don't think we can fight. And I just want to wish you a merciful death. And I remember dressing in my burial clothes at age 13 because I did not want to look ugly when I'm dead because I wanted to look pretty. And I remember putting on my Easter dress that my mother had made for me. And we had a 2-hour ceasefire. And my mother was combing my long hair and tying a white ribbon in it that matched the white flowers in my dress. One of the top enforcers of this politically correct driven fear is CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations. For years, CAIR had bullied, berated, intimidated, and smeared anyone who dared criticize radical Islam. For years, CAIR has been the go-to organization for the media and our government. This in spite of its documented ties to Hamas and its long list of leaders and officials who have either been investigated, arrested, or convicted on terrorism-related charges. After Hassan's terror attack, CAIR trotted out Executive Director Nihad Awad, who insisted that no religious faith could justify this attack. He insisted there was nothing in Islam that could justify this attack. He insisted this had nothing to do with Islam. Awad must have missed the hundreds of passages in the Quran and Hadith that not only allow but exhort violence against the unbelievers. Passages such as Surah 9:5, fight and kill the disbelievers wherever you find them. Or Surah 8:12, smite them on their necks and every joint and incapacitate them, strike off their heads. Or Surah 9:123, fight the unbelievers around you and let them find harshness in you. President Obama apparently missed those verses as well when he parroted CAIR's talking points at the memorial service at Fort Hood on November 10th. Obama claimed no faith justifies these murderous and craven acts. The problem is hundreds of millions of Islamists around the world who follow their holy books and centuries of Islamic jurisprudence defiantly disagree. They proclaim for all the world to see that such acts of violence against the infidel are indeed justified and exhorted by Allah. Yet the power of political correctness in America is so strong that leaders in our military and our government arrogantly presume to tell Islamists of the world that they're reading their Qur'ans wrong, that they're wrong in following the military example of Muhammad, that they're wrong listening to their mullahs and imams who exhort them to kill and conquer the infidels in the world. This is nothing short of madness. A pandemic of political correctness has chained, blinded, and muted far too many of America's leaders. As a result, they do not confront the ugly forces of Islamist bigotry, hatred, intolerance, and violence. The Fort Hood terrorist attack is a direct tragic consequence of political correctness. I founded Act for America to give patriotic Americans like yourself a voice to combat radical Islam and the political correctness that is helping advance it. It is long past time we throw political correctness in the garbage where it belongs. If you agree with me, join us. If you are fed up, concerned, frightened, or angry at the state of political correctness in our country and the price we are paying for tolerating it, then join us. Go to actforamerica.org. Sign our petition calling for a government investigation of CAIR and its ties to terrorism. Sign up to receive our email alerts. Together, we will rise and demand that our leaders put our security and our liberties ahead of politically correct-driven fear. Add your voice to ours. Become a voice affecting your community and our nation. For the sake of our children and our country, and in the face of a growing torrent of hateful invective and terrorist murder, we must wake up and take action. The longer we lay supine, the more difficult it will be to stand erect. Join with me and almost 70,000 Act for America members, and let's draw a line in the sand and say, enough is enough. Go to actforamerica.org, sign our petition, and join us. Together, we can protect our nation. Thank you.
احنا عندنا مشكلة تحديد النسل، احنا ما عندنا تحديد نسل في البحرين، والشيعة يتزوجون متعة في البحرين، وينجبون أطفال بلا عدد وبلا حساب، والشارع يربي. زين، شيء طبيعي إذا الأب يتزوج فلبينية، ويتزوج بحرينية، ويتزوج واحدة ثالثة من إيران، وياخذ له متعة 2 3 من هني، كم طفل بيجيب؟
في 12/9 صرحتي تصريحا بأنك تدعين أو تطالبين وتنصحين الخليجيات والبحرينيات بالذات المضطهدات باللجوء الاجتماعي إلى فرنسا. يعني تبغين معارضة من الخارج، عفوا إلى أسبانيا،
لأن
تبين معارضة من الخارج.
مو القصد انه معارضه من الخارج، القصد ان هم يحتمون او يعيشون في بلد امن، لان يعني اذا المراه ما حصلت على الامان في بلدها، ما حصلت على الامان في محاكمها، ما حصلت على الامان في بيت الزوجيه، طيب وين تروح؟ وين تروح؟
في ناس يقولون انه غادة جمشير سنيه، وبالتالي هي ترفع اللواء ضد الزواج مقرر شرعا عند الشيعة.
مقرر شرعا؟
عند الشيعة مقرر شرعا.
الشريعة الإسلامية أقرت المتعة اللي بهذه التصنيفة اللي أنا بقولها لك. التمتع بالمفاخذة، عندهم التمتع بالملامسة، زين، التمتع بالمكاعبة، التمتع بالصغيرة. التمتع بالصغيرة تعرف شنو معناتها؟ معناتها يتمتعون بالطفل اللي عمرها 2 3 سنين 4 سنين.
طيب عشان ما ندخل بس في
التمتع
تفصيلات.
بالمفاخذة خل اشرح لك شنو هو.
لا تشرحي لي.
هذه ضد حقوق الطفل، هذه يعتبر اعتداء جنسي على الطفلة. يعني التمتع بالمفاخذة شنو ذي؟ التمتع بالرضيعة معناته ذي. زين، الرضيعة يعني كم عمرها؟ سنة ونص، أشهر. يعني هل يعقل رجل بالغ يمارس الجنس مع طفلة رضيعة؟
بس
وتقولون لي الشريعة الإسلامية أحلت هذه الأمور؟ خل المتعة، المسيار، شنو معنات المسيار؟ تقول أنا سنية وأهاجم الشيعة؟ لا،
أنا أقول لك في ناس يقولون زي كذا.
لا، أنا بقول لك المسيار شنو هو؟ يعني يتزوج واحدة في بلد ثانية ويروح يسير عليها في الشهر مرة، يزورها، اسمها متزوجة. هذه النوع من الزيجات
ممكن مش بالضرورة بالشهر، ممكن كل يوم.
تركي، هذه النوع من الزيجات، هذه النوع من الممارسات تحط من كرامة المرأة كإنسان. المرأة طول عمرها محبوسة في البيت، ما تخرج إلى العمل السنين اللي فاتت، ما تخرج للدراسة برا، ما تسافر برا تدرس السنين اللي فاتت. فئة بسيطة منهم، فئة بسيطة اللي تسافر وتدرس في الجامعات برا البحرين أو يعني زين، موجودة في البيت للطبخ وللكنس ولتربية الأطفال. من وين تجي الثقافة؟ وفي بعض النساء يعني أهاليهم متشددين، يتزوجونهم حتى زواج إجباري. زين، أنت قول لي ليش تمارس عادة الختان إلى اليوم في الوطن العربي؟ ليش؟ لأن ما في ثقافة، ما في تثقيف، ما في توعية. يعني من كم يوم توفت بنت اسمها أنعام 4 سنوات عمرها في السودان.
ليش؟
ممارسة الختان صادها تسمم في الدم 4 سنوات.
To identify what sexual relationship with little girl, she is not even maybe a 1 week or 2 weeks old, because as you see it's radia, which means she's just drink milk. I don't know. This is what your imam saying. He's saying sexual relationship by hugs. Read with me. This is your Islamic site. As you see, this is not my website. All kind of sexual relationship, like touch with desire. Look at the desire. And hugs and tafkhid. Touch with desire, or hugs, or putting your private part between the legs of that little baby. This is his explanation. I'm reading just exactly as he wrote. I'm not adding one word. He's saying doing that to a little girl, she can drink milk only, she is a radia, suckling, girl. It's okay. You can touch her in a sexual way, to enjoy her. You can hug her in a sexual way, it's okay. Or you can put your private manhood between her legs to enjoy her. Now you tell me what you understand from that. Your mic.
Okay, don't forget that this baby, okay, this Radia is a wife. Is a wife. He is not fucking her. Okay, the husband is not fucking.
Don't use dirty words, Doctor. Listen. I know you are in the corner. Listen. She is a little girl. What do you mean wife? She cannot eat yet. She drink only milk. What do you mean she's a wife? Guys, she's a wife. She don't have teeth yet. How you say she is a wife? Your mic? Man. Go ahead.
Can you tell me what's the difference between, marriage and non-marriage, between legal and illegal relation? Your mic.
Doctor, don't change the topic. How you can marry a little girl, she don't have teeth even? You said she is a wife. Explain to us in the room how Muslims marry a girl, she don't have her teeth yet. She drink milk only. She suckle only. How she became a wife, and how he is approving you to touch her in a sexual way, to enjoy her in a sexual way. Not only that, to put your private part between her legs. Your mic.
Okay, we are talking about marriage, okay? This situation is a special situation. We never seen a husband.
Listen, what's special situation? Listen, this is your scholars, the one you approve as a big leader for you, saying you can have relationship sexually with little baby girl. She don't have teeth yet. Explain to us how you can do such a thing. Your mic.
Okay, I'm allowed to have a baby wife, okay? But did I have,
baby wife?
Do I have right now a baby wife? Your mic.
I don't care if you have a baby wife or not. But how your God allowed you to have a baby wife, man? She cannot even eat. She is still in her diaper. She do poo-poo. How you take her as a wife? How you enjoy her in a sex way? How? Explain to us. What kind of religion this religion would allow you to have a baby wife? You have it. You don't have it. Your religion allowed you. You can do it. Because in Islam it's okay. So how you can have a baby wife who do not have teeth yet, who cannot even speak yet, who say, come on. How you can have sex with a girl like this? Your mic. Go ahead.
Okay. Who put the standards? If this girl is a baby or a woman, I can marry to a woman, or if there is, who put the rules so that I can marry to a woman if she, a special age? Humans, who put this is standards, okay? Who put this is not God who put the standards, okay? This is humans.
Okay, so a human, they put the standard of 18 years old to marry. Your God saying you can have sex with a girl, she don't have even her teeth yet. Which one is correct, you think? Which one is better? The human standard or your God standard? Your mic.
Well, of course, God. You are a human. Okay, you shit in the...
Of course, God, which means having sex with a girl she is 1 week old, is right. Did you hear it, guys? Of course, God is right. So you approve your God teaching you such a teaching? Your mic?
He's God, man. He is God. God allow me, gave me, forbidden and legal and illegal stuff. Okay. God gave me a special case. He's a special case. He says that you can marry a baby, okay, but you don't, practice intersexual, okay. How can I explain this in English, man? Okay. Christian Prince. Put the standards for a girl to reach 18 and get married. Okay. God says, a special case, that baby, you can marry to a baby, but you don't, but your, do,
your penis.
big, bang, bang, I don't know, how can you say it? Okay. He said, you can touch her, okay. You can touch her, but when she reaches 9 years old, you can do whatever you want.
Right, huh?
Okay. So what's wrong with...
So from the age of 1 week or 2 days of that little girl until the age of 9, you can have all kind of sexual relationship with her, and what's wrong? So if we go and see you in the bedroom with the girl, she is 2 weeks old, and you are playing with your private part between her legs, doing masturbation, it's okay in Islam, right? Your mic.
We are talking about a special case, my friend. You don't understand.
What do you mean a special case? This is allowed for every Muslim man to do. It's not a special case. In what case? It's a teaching for you to do. You are allowed to do it. Your mic.
Did you see any Muslim got married to a baby 1 week?
How I know? If you are allowed to do it, it means you are allowed to do it. That's what we care for. Allah allowed you to do it. Are you saying that Muslims don't follow the teaching of Allah because it's disgusting? The question is why Allah is allowing you to do such a thing for a little baby. Even dogs and cats don't do that. Your mic.
Well, he gave me the permission, but I did not do it, and I never heard about, anybody did it, okay? But I have the permission. So what's wrong? I never did it. Nobody. So what's...
You get the permission. This is the story. Allah is giving you permission to have sex with one day girl old, 1 day, 2 days, 1 week. What kind of God this God is? I get the permission, but I never did. Because you live in the West, if you did it, you go to jail. Do you see, guys, what kind of God we are talking about? Is that God? This is Satan himself. God don't allow such a thing. Jesus, he said that those who harm the little ones, they will burn in hell. Those who harm the little one, they will burn in hell. And this man, he just told us that Allah promote him and allowed him to have sexual relationship with 1 day old girl. A shame of...
tell me my religion was wrong. They tried to tell me to follow Islam. They said their prophet was a righteous dude, but I found out none of their words were true. I read the Quran and I read the Hadith, and the sickness of Muhammad was apparent to me. He justified perversion in the name of Allah when he married a girl too young for a bra. She was playing with dolls when the prophet came. Her childhood was stolen in Allah's name. Aisha was 9 when he took her to bed. Don't tell me that fool's not sick in the head. Ain't gonna follow no child molester, sex offender, prophet pretender. Ain't gonna follow no child molester.
Islam's not for me. Islam's not for me.
The sickness of the Islamic mind
has caused the mullahs to be blind.
To justify their prophet, they will justify sin, so the sins of the prophet are repeated again.
All over the world in Islamic states, 9-year-old girls suffer cruel fate.
Sold into marriage to twisted men, and Aisha's sad story is repeated again. Ain't gonna follow no child molester, sex offender, prophet pretender. Ain't gonna follow no child molester.
Islam's not for me. Islam's not for me. Do you care about women all over the world?
Do you care about those little girls?
Then stand up and fight for human rights. Speak out against the laws of Islam.
Ain't gonna follow no child molester, sex offender, prophet pretender. Ain't gonna follow no child molester.
Islam's not for me. Islam's not for me.